Just want to say I did watch all of your presentations from the Capstone Touch Motion yesterday. Awesome work, everyone. You've come such an incredibly long way. You should be really proud of where you're at. I know that was like our last demo day, but keep at it. Again, keep at those one-on-one times if you need it. Get all the help you can. I know it's going to get really tough here. What is it, 2 weeks left before? Well, 2 in a couple days, but that last week too, I hope will be helpful. Getting all the instructors and TAs and other stuff back, but yeah, awesome work. Seriously, you should all be very proud. Secondly, just before I forget here, just reiterating from what Will said yesterday, use those stipends. So just spend the money, please, to help us. And so, like Will said yesterday as well, if everyone uses half their stipends by tomorrow and today, then we'll increase it by 100. If you use it all by Friday, increase it by another 100. So
you have to prove to us that you spent it too.
Yeah, so just just the student stipend form like you always do. But yeah, that money's for you, so use it. And hopefully, from the resources other people have wanted. I know Kate brought it up to me. If you want to use it for business cards, resumes, stuff like that. Like as long as it helps you, there's all the questions in here, different program, then you can use that money. So be creative with it too. If there's other courses, obviously that's great. But yeah, anything you want to do on that front, in terms of professional development, we're completely open to. Just hit us up and ask. And then, yes.
Good question. Is there a point to printing up resumes? Do I kind of feel like everything's online?
Yeah, so everyone still loves the hard copy. The digital will ultimately be the final thing where it's like, hey, I have attached my resume, et cetera. But for that capstone presentations on the 22nd, there'll be employers there. It'd be a good idea to have physical on-hand resumes. I'd say print 10, 20 of them, whatever. But yeah, so if you want to get that paper or whatever, feel free. So cool. But any other questions, folks, from Friday or Monday? Student stipends. Also, I know I said it would come checks today, but we finally got ACH set up. So if everyone's comfortable with that, if everyone needs them in advance, just flag me down or send me a message on Skype. But if everyone would like to figure out how to do this ACH stuff too. So still cool with that. It's ACH payment, basically direct deposit. If not, check is cool too. I have checks on me, but I guess I'll ask, is everyone cool with ACH? So, or is I can do that too. It's seriously, it's no big deal. For me, it's way easier for ACH because I all up for money. So oops, sorry. But if you guys need the money today, I can do that too. So yes. Hang me on Slack if you want your checks today, and then otherwise I'll assume ACH. That's cool. That one. Is that cool? That one. Yes, Dan.
The extra $100, is that an all or nothing, or is it individual? Because I think I'm probably already more than that. I'm sure I'm over.
Yeah, so ideally we'd like everyone to spend that money just because otherwise we'll lose it. And so the main reason is because we'll lose it for the next cohort. Okay. So if we don't justify that this money's been used, then we won't get it as much or we might not get it at all. So that's like that. That's one of the reason why we do it that way. So, okay. And then that's about it. Anything else, Will, you're going to bring up? No. Cool. All right, last thing before I introduce Ben here. So Sam, I think we got to introduce yesterday. So Sam, if you'd like to say a couple words on who you are, all that kind of stuff.
So I'm TA. I was helping you yesterday. I work at AXO, the building right next to Tech Garden. I'm a full stack developer there. But I do mostly front end because it's what I'm responsible for. I work in, like, so you guys work on React. I work a lot in Angular. It's just a different framework. Yeah, I just work on different backends. Spring Boot, I've done a lot of stuff in Node, and I'm really familiar with JavaScript, TypeScript, and compiling. Like what some of the tools you guys are using for compiling your projects, like Webpack and things. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. And Sam will be your TA this week and next week. So forth you guys TA. Sam on board. Cool. Any other questions, folks? Anything else from me? Did you? I have one from the conference today.
Yeah, that's the whole. Are we streaming yet?
I think so. Yes. Are we? Yeah. I think we're muted though. Are we?
No, we're unmuted.
We're muted?
We are unmuted. Yeah. Yeah,
Not muted.
yeah, we're not muted. Okay, cool. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ben Lannon. So Ben, web developer out in Rome, correct there? Yes, and then he's also an very active contributor to Gas, which I know that some of you are kind of dabbling a little bit for your capstone and some side projects. So Ben knows sort of all the ins and outs of open source and contributing into the ecosystem. So very fortunate to have him. And yeah, so to do, Ben, I'll let you take it away. Thank you, Ben. Awesome.
Yeah, so I just want to give like a kind of thing. I got, as Jesse said, I've been part of the like JavaScript, like the open source ecosystem, like that community for quite a while now. So I feel like it would be nice to like give some perspective and some insights of just things like kind of revolving around open source in general. So like for those, let me see. So for those of like who may not be aware of the term, just to make sure all the ground rules are just like set. Open source usually is where people develop software where the code base is fully public and it is free to obtain, modify, and even redistribute. So like if you want to say, take some open source products, like take it, modify it, and then redistribute it as like you are mostly fully willing, like able to do so, as long as like they're abided by like the certain license that it gives. Like most licenses, the things that they say like we don't, like the developers, like we don't, as they maintain open source projects, we don't give a warranty for the product. So like if something happens, that. And usually you want to give a, like they have a copyright notice for like, so even though the code itself is for open source, there still is copyright and like trademark and those kinds of laws by default on the software. Some examples that you may have seen, so VS Code, Node.js, so I think I've heard you guys have been doing that here. But also like other things, like for instance, like there's modeling software called Blender, fully open source. The Firefox web browser is fully open source. Like all these things are, like if you want to like jump in and start like tinker around, like either seeing like how it works, or like just play around and maybe even want into it and like I have some idea for a feature for that. I would like to work on it. Like these and plenty of like hundreds upon thousands upon millions of other pieces of software are open source and allow these niceties. I think that's like kind of with that. A thing that really got me into it was like I like as a developer, I do have that mindset of like, you know, this is like I'm looking at the software and like it works great and all, but like how does this one thing work, or how does like this other thing work? And I want to dig into the code and actually see, like, do a deep dive and actually see how it works behind the scenes. So, and as well, if there's anything that you want to have a question on or you want to bring up, feel free to just stop me at any time and we can talk. Yeah.
Can databases be open source?
Oh yeah, so I think, yeah, so I think like, well, the actual databases, so I think like MySQL and Postgres, I think those are both open source databases. So like the software around it is fully open source.
What happens, I was reading somewhere, there was an open source with a database, it was some kind of medical related, but tons of information, and then they sold it to Merck Pharma Company. How often does that happen with open source?
So to have like
To have it get, or have it.
like to be purchased and then like kind of like taken down. Yeah. So for the most part, the nice thing about open source is it is like completely like it's very, because like it is a very interesting topic since it's dealing with like when you say like in terms of open source, there usually is like there's a sense of where you're just developing stuff and you put your code up on GitHub and anyone can go look at it. But then there's these situations where like you had mentioned, like there's maybe a product that someone, like maybe a company who like, or a couple of people who maintain that piece of software, maybe is acquired by a private company or bought by, like things like that. So in the most part, like one thing that a lot of people like as niceties is there is points where like if you pull the code down and like you have it and like there's a specific like version of that code, like so maybe there was like my database version 4.2.0, like that was the last version before before someone purchased it. The nice thing is because of how the open source infrastructure works, anyone can use that version from there on out. So like even if someone grabs like if say you decide to purchase my database and you're like, okay, I want to make some more, I want to close it off. You can't touch that open, like you can't touch the open version because like it's just already out there.
So perhaps what I was thinking of wasn't technically open source, it was just there. And it was known to be there and a lot of developers used it.
Yeah.
Until it was part, so maybe it wasn't technically open source.
Yeah, but like I think this is the thing of like, yeah, there's a very wide spectrum of like stuff that is like of how software is of like there's people consider like proprietary commercial software that you have to like pay for a license. There's software that you have to like the freemium where they may like add like if you can do it for free, but like there may be ads there, you may have to send like telemetry, these things. So but with that, like that, there is a large spectrum of like things in that sense.
It means like open source, the terms itself are broad.
Yeah, so there's that's kind of source, and then also like it like could go alongside this. Other other public licenses of like open licenses kind of go alongside. So like if you have like a piece of data or like or this is more software, like if you have data or maybe various things, like you want to like say this set of data is free or like these images are free, you may want to have like a Creative Commons license. So like that's a license where you can say that a piece of data or maybe an image or like those things are publicly available to use, like it's public domain. And that's actually another license. So like it's a very like large amount of various things.
If it just meant GitHub or.
Yeah, actually, and further in, like, my thing is like GitHub is like, it's a very large place where a lot of people put stuff, but it isn't the only place. Like it is just like it's one location in part of management. Okay. Yeah. So that kind of simple.
Yeah, very much, thank you.
Yeah, I had a question. Is there like an easy way to kind of get into the open source community?
Yeah, so actually I have a couple of slides on that further on. Yeah, so like those are kinds of just things in general. And then some just example projects that either I've worked on personally. So for one, the Syracuse.io website, myself and another person at OpenHub, we developed, we said like, we want to rewrite the website to kind of keep it up to date, keep it, align it, keep it like connected into the meetup events. Like if there's an event there, it'll be synced with that site. So that's fully available. I think if you go to that site, so I post them, if I pull up here, yeah. And scroll down to the bottom, there's actually like this GitHub link right here at the bottom that you can just kind of click on. Then go to the Syracuse.io, this one, not Syracuse, so Syracuse.io was the older version. Syracuse.io is the newer one. So like all the source code is here. If you want to submit an issue or if you want to do something, it's fully available to do such here.
What's the new one?
It is Syracuse.io without a dot, while the dot is the older version. Of that. So. One moment. Let me check it. Bring the slide back. Just bring the slide back up.
Oh, did you navigate away from that?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we have that. And then as well, another project that I've been fairly heavily involved with is Gatsby. So it's a performance-focused React stack site generator. So I've heard like a couple of you have been working on it. So I've been working on like I've been using it for over like a year and a half, I would say, and I've been like actively participating in the actual development of it, whether it be through the documentation, whether it be through writing blog posts or doing like making videos about like having a broad way of like helping and contributing to the ecosystem. So one question is like, you know, you want to get into this and like, where should you start? So like, I would say a good first thing is like, think of some projects that may be open source, or maybe like you may be not unsure if something's open source. Usually if you can go to the site, like if they have like that GitHub link somewhere on the site, usually that means like either a portion of it is open source or maybe the entire actual project is open source. So like usually seeing a GitHub link somewhere, whether it be in like a footer, a navbar, somewhere in there, you can kind of get an understanding. But also looking, if that is the case, if you see like a community section, you can kind of like community like tab or page or somewhere on the site, it can give you an understanding of, okay, here is like this is like displaying like the community for a certain product. So like for instance, for Gatsby, we actually have a contributing section. So we actually have an entire page, like entire section of pages talking about how you can get involved with the project and just a bunch of various ways of doing that. As well, so as I was saying, like GitHub is like one of the places usually you can push code up to, but there's also other other companies and stuff that offer Git hosting. So GitLab actually is a fully open source product itself, and it has a commercial service that you can like pay for like extra features, but the core of GitLab itself is open source. You can like download it, and if you want to spin up your own version of it, they are fully encouraging to that you're able to do so. And then as well, Atlassian made a product called Buczek, so it's just another service like GitHub or GitLab that offers Git hosting, and you can have like project management tools like issues or pull requests of that such. And as well, really another good place is like finding community forums or chapter. So there, like if you find a Slack channel, even if it's for like some things have specific like things for the specific project, and maybe it may be for just like a general community. So maybe there's a JavaScript Slack that you may find. There may be one for React, or maybe one for like various spaces. And then as well, like Gatsby, we actually have a Discord. So it's another tool like similar to Slack, but it's similar vein. And then there's also a tool called Gitter, which is like it's just another platform that's more of that's just another one. But as well, like if there's maybe there's a thing rather than where they use issues on GitHub, they may just have a community forum where you can it's more of a formatting software where you submit posts and then kind of threads rather than having issues in that sense. So get that. So one thing to start is for instance, maybe you want to help and you want to get into it and you want to contribute code to something. So starting out with there, the two best things to look for is in GitHub, there is certain tags that you can say maybe this is a feature, maybe this is a bug. The two best things to look for is help wanted and good first issue. So there's some slight differences between the two. Good first issue is for if you have never walked into this project before. Here's an issue that's either a maintainer will be able to help you and guide you to how to resolve it, how to resolve an issue or a feature. And then help on it is maybe just at large, we're looking for help. We're looking for people in the community to kind of help out and build something, so, and I was saying like, yeah, so it's, a lot of maintainers are very willing to kind of help you along, so like, whether it's in the issue itself of saying like, hey, so here's the issue, you may want to look at these particular files, and here's a doc on how to like get to spin, like how to spin up the project on your own machine. And like they usually will be very helping. As well, there is a forgot to write it down, but there is a, with a lot of projects, there is a contributing like document that basically says, hey, how do I write, like how do I download this and spin it up on my own machine? How do I maybe run the test? How do I do all these various things that you may want to know about when you're developing in that? So like if I open a new tab, let's see. So, what's up here? So, if actually, in just pick it up, if you kind of just go to, like, we have all these various issues up here, but like, if I go down to labels and search for good first issue. So here is just like, there is a bunch, if I zoom this up, so I'll get that bigger. There's just a bunch of various things where they kind of talk about, like, here are some good first issues. And you can kind of just scroll through things and see various things. So like one that we actually had was like, if, like here was like a good first issue where it was saying, hey, there was a project, like we have a bunch of examples, like example sites that people like using particular technologies with. So like they're saying this style guide example, like some of the dependencies were out of date. So they're saying like, hey, would people be interested in like kind of helping out, like updating and making sure it still works with like updated versions of various packages internally. And then like here, so Dustin, this is one of the developers at Gatsby. He was like saying, okay, so you'll need to fork the repo and then follow up the setup process. So he was like saying, you should, like you can click that and it goes to documents. He's saying the change will be isolated to a specific directory. So he's like saying, just look in this directory. And then he's like saying maybe there's some like particular packages that you may want to update. So like look at these packages. And then he's saying like, hey, maybe since this is a major update, you may want to look at the change log to just make sure that when you update, you make some particular changes. And then finally he's saying like, once you do all these changes, make sure you can like run in development mode or you can build the site and it still works as expected. So like this is a good structure for like figuring out how to get through this. And then another like a contributor in the community said that he was interested in taking it. And then there's just a discussion. So like this is like a good, I would say this is a very good thing of saying like what the topic, what the issue was, and how to solve it in a very straightforward way. So that's that. So we have that. And then as well, like as I was saying, like if as you say, like a lot of code bases, they may have tests around like making sure that the code works, but sometimes as developers, we don't have all the time in the world to get to the test. So like if a project, if you see a project and you say, okay, this portion of like maybe this one file, like one single file in the code base isn't available, like isn't really tested. Like you saw, okay, here's the code. Are there any tests for this? You may want to go to say like, okay, let's see what this code does, and then let's maybe write some tests for like saying, okay, if I pass in this property or this variable in, it should give us this reason, like it should give us this answer. So like it's a very simple things to do, but it gives a very nice security, like a layer of security, because like if then from there on, if someone is like working on something and they work on something that indirectly breaks the code that you just made tests for, then that test should fail. And they can say, oh, what? Then they can go back and they say, okay, why did this break? So yeah, that. And then as well, just like, I think a good thing to keep in mind is you like with like something like Gatsby, we've had over 2,000 people contribute to the project. We've had like there's like 40,000 stars on GitHub. So it's a very popular project, and like it may be intimidating to say, hey, I have an idea that I want to like bring up, but I'm like it may be a little frightening to say like to just like actually get the courage to bring up that topic. Like that, like if there's an issue or there's a feature request. But I'd say like don't be afraid to go like if like really the only thing like the worst thing that can happen is maybe to say like like they may say okay it may be out of scope or like it's not in the realm of what we're looking for. But the nice thing about GitHub is you can literally fork the repo and you can build it up yourself. Like, and then they may not have like sometimes developers maybe like if you're working on it as like a sub thing off of it, like developers may be willing to help out if you're like building for that section, or like if you like for Gatsby, since our ecosystem is based upon like a core the core framework and a lot of plugins. Sometimes we say, hey, we're unsure if this is right for the core framework, but we'd love to get a submission of it, like this as a plugin. This sounds like a good thing that's maybe not everyone could use, but like maybe at least not people could use. So like that's another way where even if it's not bringing it brought into the core of the framework, see if you can write a plugin for it or some way that you can kind of inject it into a project. So now that was kind of just like the actual code things, but like the thing that is nice about open source is you don't even need to write code at all to contribute to open source. So kind of had just this quick view list of them. So like starting out like having good documentation for the site. So like if there's a project and like you want to say like you want to make sure it's documented, there may not be the doc. So like maybe working with developers on the project or figuring out, okay, like this is how this project works. This is how this piece of the project works. Let's document that. And so if someone comes to the site for like a certain project and they want to say, oh, but how does this work? Then you can see that there's like a nicely worded document saying you can use it this way and do that. If it's a website more so, people are always looking for accessibility improvements. So like if kind of going through with either a screen or looking for color contrast, they're small wins, but they really have a good impact because you're like giving more opportunities to have more people to be able to use a website. If you are maybe good with like marketing or design, so like maybe there's a project that they're looking for someone who like wants to like looking for like a logo for the site, or they want to have like a designer like come and help them out with the site. Like if you're good with marketing or graphic design, those kinds of things. Those are very good ways of like helping out a project, even though it's not really in a technical sense. It's still helping out in the project itself. And then as well, like promoting like the content on social media. Like if you said, hey, I was going like maybe you were scrolling through GitHub looking at projects and you found this cool project that you think it would be cool to share with other people. Like that's, I think like sharing like that knowledge with others is a very like it's a simple thing to do, but like then maybe someone was coming along and they like were looking for a project that did this one thing and you like that's the project that you maybe just shared. Then you may have solved their problem. Like, oh, I was waiting for something that did X, and then you found it. So like thank you. So, and like there's plenty more, but like those are just some examples of things that I did. And then kind of alongside that, like there's always like the questions of, okay, so like the tool or the library or the piece of software is great, but like maybe why did you do that? Like why did you build it this way? Or what things are you interested in building in the future, or various things of this nature? And like for me, for like just learning, like being part of these communities, there's like a lot of various different ways to like listen in and get some insights from the creators themselves. So like one way is to like listen to podcasts. So, like there is like various like there's almost unlimited amount of podcasts. Even in the tech field, like there's dozens upon dozens, like there's a huge amount of podcasts where they may have like a guest, the person who wrote a framework, or a person who does like marketing for the framework, or like maybe it's a software engineer, like it's someone who comes on and maybe talks about the products, maybe talks about where the piece of software is going, where like what are some struggles they got through. The second one, so more, this is actually kind of being a more newer thing. It's compared to other things, but there's people who are now doing like either like making YouTube videos about a piece of software. Maybe it's someone who like they want to make a video tutorial series on like using this piece of software, but also maybe they want to make videos about them actually developing the software. And then the second one, like Twitch streams, there is, so for those who aren't aware, Twitch is a live streaming platform that basically, it started out as a platform for game, but really has expanded to the point where now there's more and more people who are like going on there and doing more creative things. Like maybe they're going there and doing painting, or they're maybe doing arts and crafts, or they're doing sewing, or like various things. And then on more the technical side, they also have people who are making games, who are writing websites, writing software, all these various things.
Twitch.
Yeah.
Are they both run by Google?
So YouTube is run by Google. Twitch used to be its own entity. Now it's run by Amazon. So, and it feels more and more that we live in a world where these tech giants own everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
What's that? Amazon, Google.
oh yeah, Fang.
Yeah, but now
Yeah, it's
Alphabet.
Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet. I think Netflix.
Somebody's turned it into MAGA.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
The riff off our.
Yeah. So there is a lot. But like for instance, like for some like especially for Gatsby stuff, I like one of the developers at Gatsby. Well, he's more like he has a lot of various jobs because it's a startup. They're like people have a lot of hats. They wear a lot of hats, do a lot of things. Jason Langstorp, he is a developer there, and it started out as every Thursday he would come on. He would like have an invited guest to do like something involving Gatsby. So like maybe there's someone who like want to do e-commerce with Gatsby. They would talk about that. So he has like these domain experts on certain things like e-commerce. Maybe it's working with authentication. Maybe it's working with images, like all these various different types. And like he brought that. And now he's like doing it like sometimes 3-4 times a week. So he's getting a lot of people in the community, like saying like, here's all the things you can do with Gatsby. Like even though like at first like you say, okay, what can you do with a static site? You can show that, like he's showing that you can do quite a lot with it. And then actually as well, I've been streaming. I think it started like in May or June. So I've been doing this for about once a week every for a decent amount of time. But it's I think it's a point where one of our co-streamer of mine, he commented that like he was commenting like, he has times where like he's been going to conferences and he's been giving talks and all, but he wants to get that experience. But like when there isn't maybe conferences, maybe when it's a lull, or maybe there's not conferences he's going to, he still wants to have the opportunity to speak about technologies he enjoys and like talk about things in that sense. And like Twitch gives them that avenue, like to like really push, like talk about technology that he really cares about. So that. As well, like a good way, like a good insight is like people write blog posts. So like it may be on their personal blog. It may be on something like Medium. I actually did a highlighted a thing called Dev2, which is a site that is specifically for developers. So it's a blogging site that's very specified towards developers, and it really has a good spectrum of people getting into development, as well as like maybe like people like at these companies like Microsoft or Amazon, like giving talks about like writing blog posts about like various technologies, and then as well talking about like sometimes talking about the stuff that's not like just like more of the human skills rather than just the technical code all the time.
Is that dev2 DEV, the number 2?
It's dev.to.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's a lot of good help there. Found.
Yeah.
Been confused, like find a blog or something.
Yeah. And
Newbie stuff. So,
yeah, and like the thing, like a very good thing is like sometimes a lot of these developers or these people in tech, they blog because they want to make a reference for themselves in the future. Because like sometimes like people are like, okay, I figured out I was like stuck one day like with this project, like with this problem, and I was able to resolve it. So let me write a like blog post of like how I did it, and then maybe in the future, like you stuck with something, and like this seems familiar. You search like a term that you would think like how to fix this, and then you end up on your blog post. There's been a lot of like I've just listened, and there's plenty of people who just do this and like they just land on their own stuff because like the way you like write like you would search like write maybe a title for a blog post may be very similar to how you search on the web. So like it has like the way like the search algorithms work is like it probably like it could lead you where that would be very like when you search a certain term a certain way, it may bring up something like that you wrote because that's the way like that style of writing came up. And then last of all, contacting the devs directly, like there's sometimes like it's sometimes scary, like, oh, this project like for instance, VS Code is developed by Microsoft. It sometimes is like oh, they're too busy to just talk to me about something. But like honestly, like either on Twitter or maybe send them an email, contacting them like directly and saying, hey, like maybe it's like I have a question or something, is a very good way to like just get opportunity to like either learn about the tool or get help with the tool. And even if they're not available, like they may have okay, like I can't work on this, but maybe one of my coworkers can help you out here, and you get that like they can bring that conversation up and really help out in a time where like you may like I'm stuck, I don't know what to do. They need to help out in that sense. So it's like I think a lot of times people say, oh, like the people like the developers that are like have thousands of like tens of thousands of followers on Twitter, or they go to all the conferences and always talk at the conferences. Like these are people that are very big in the industry. But like at the end of the day, they're just people. So like usually if you send them a message, it is dependent on the person. It's like sometimes someone may be busy, but a lot of times like if you just contact them, like you could be surprised, and like they may just like at one point they may respond to you like in 5 seconds. They may just like it really depends on the person, but you may be surprised with it. So, and then I think I have just some insights that I found about open source in general. That's a good thing to start with is really starting with, like, if you're saying, I want to start helping out with a project, I want to start contributing, whether it be through like code or like more of the things of documentation or maybe design or something like that. Look for something you can. So like, I wouldn't say like you're not gonna get far if you say, oh, I'm gonna pick a random thing and I'm just gonna go for it. Usually, like it's really beneficial for an individual to say, hey, I've been like, for instance, for me, I was using Gatsby for like a few months, and I was like, I want to keep on helping this. Like, the community is very welcoming. And I was like, I want to be able to give my insights and my skills to kind of give back to that. So like that's like, because I care about this community, like that's kind of drives me to continue to contribute and continue to like help out. Another thing is having good communication is like, I think in like, this isn't just like open source development, but like development at large, if you can communicate well, if you can be a reasonable human being, you can get pretty far in the development field. Just like, because a lot of times, like 90% of the time, the issues that arise through development, it's not the code, it's the people. It's always the people. So just if you can be able to, if maybe you have an issue and you are like, I'm stuck with this thing. If you can either communicate that well, you can maybe make a thing of like, here are some steps I did to get this issue, or like find this bug. Or like, hey, I want to add a suggested feature for this thing. If you like maybe give like an example of like how we can use this, or like why we should use this, it gives you a lot of perspective rather than me going on to a repo and it's like, help, my site's broken, help, and like giving no context of like what's going on or such. Having patience, I would say, is another, like, a lot of these things are very relevant to open source, but like they're relevant in just being like in development and just in life in general, I would say. Because like with open source, like you, like sometimes like at one point, like you may have made that fix, you like found that fix and I'm going to submit it up so the developer, the maintainer can review it. You're like, okay, I submitted it, they're going to get to it right away. That may not always be the case. You may have to, like, it may take a little while to get through something. It's, like sometimes these open source developers are doing this out of their own, like just their own time. Like for instance, like for me with Gatsby, I don't work for Gatsby, yet I'm taking all this time out of my free time to help out. So like, I may not always have like 24/7 access to this. So, and like even even large scale people who are developing, they may not be paid to do this, like the open source art. They may just be doing it in their free time as well. So having these opportunities, like you want to like just wait out, like they will get to it when they have time, or they can maybe have like, they'll have say, hey, like maybe another person, another maintainer is like, hey, I'm not available, but can you look at this PR or this issue? And then as well, like, again, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, if you are getting stuck on a problem, like, no matter how simple it is, like, finding a avenue, like, either be on Twitter, maybe it's on a forum, like something like Slack, reaching out and saying, hey, can someone help me? Like, is a very, like, it's, for the most, like, depending on the community, it may take a little bit, but like for very good communities, like for instance, Guts's community, like during the day, if someone has an issue, like there is a need help channel specifically where we can say, hey, I'm working on this project, I'm using this piece of like this plugin. Has anyone else used it? Can they possibly help out? And that can lead to possibly like having like maybe a pair programming session of like having two people like look at the code, see like what's wrong, and see if we can fix it. And I think that's a very good thing to like, that it can bring forward like a lot of opportunities by just asking for help. Like really, if you're working in something like, And in general, if you ask for help, there will probably be someone that can help. So that was it for kind of my stuff. So again, does anyone have like just any lingering questions about open source, about maybe being part of like maintaining an open source project, or like just anything in general in that sense? Yeah.
Are there any like communities that are built around like maybe a social issue or a hobby where there are like tech people, like not necessarily for tech, but maybe analyzing data for some
Yeah.
sort of help? Do you know?
Yeah, so I think there, actually let me search things, because there is, so like, there is one person in particular, his name is Cinder Soros. He lives, I think, down in like Eastern Asia, because I found that that was actually a very cheap place to live. But he's actually he's an open source developer, and that's his life. Like that's what he does. One of the things that he actually built, and he kind of like blew up, was he made a thing called a awesome list. So this is just a place on GitHub where there is literally as many, like, if you can think of a topic, there's probably something for it. So I can actually, let me see if I can, let's see if I can, I'm just gonna actually bring the toolbar back up. So, there we go. Thank you, Joey, for recently going to something of his. So he has so this is a awesome list about all kinds of, so it's an awesome list about awesome lists.
Okay.
But like, so you're saying you want to do something with like maybe like helping on with like a public service kind of thing.
Yeah,
So like
organized around content as opposed to just coding.
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
So
using coding.
so there's so language. So there's like a lot of languages. There's stuff front end.
Wait, one person?
He started it, and then there's been like, let me see how many developers have helped out. So over 400 people have like helped and contributed lists to this list, because like each of these various lists go into their own list. So like, for instance, here there's one for Node.js. So I can click on this one, and then there's a list of all like a huge amount of resources for Node.js. Yeah. Yeah, but like there's.
You know, you're thinking activism type.
Like actually.
There's.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they need people to do.
Here's a gram-negative bacteria, and we want to hack it. And
Yeah.
we're-
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Books, editors, gaming,
There's guys interested in everything.
yeah, there's just a bunch of various things. Media,
Oh, cool.
learn. Yeah, so there's even like there's some learning ones. So like if you want like there's that. Security, content management systems, robotics, businesses, work, networking. So that's like actual software networking compared to like this networking.
Right.
Decentralized systems.
Cool.
Let's see. Just kind of list. Now we have one this is on the awesome list, and there's a list for awesome. This actually goes to itself. Yeah. But like there's self-hosted, research, code.
Or speaking
Oh,
friendly.
there's
Tools
one.
for activism.
Tools for activism.
That's fun. So what's here?
Because I've heard like stories and stuff about, like, for example, there was a clip of in some African country where someone killed someone, I think, and nobody would take responsibility. So they they put the pictures out, and people like open source found this ridge line in Africa where they recognized it, and they're like, oh, it's this place, and that place is controlled by the government, so it was probably, like they made a case against the government using this, you know, it's like, oh, they just put the stuff out there.
Yeah, so that,
Like immigration and customs enforcement.
yes,
Oh, yeah.
national democracy, yeah, so there's like this, there's browsers,
Cool.
so like here's a bunch of various things, and that as well, like, I think there's like a nice thing that comes about, like, maybe for like even like a local, like helping out at a local community, shouting out to Jesse, like Hackupsy is a great, like, for instance, like local half-times are great places to like get out and like build products that really help your community at large.
Right.
So like that's like, even that's another place to like get out
Yeah.
like, and get things that can actually help the community at large.
Yeah. I'd be interested in
But, I mean, well, I just use this. Yeah, but like there's,
Cool.
there-
Even like climate change, I'm sure there's probably things for that.
yeah, there's like this from this, like there is so many like things here. Like the list escapes, and so these are like just like this is kind of just a catch-all.
Yeah. Oh, that's
yeah.
really good. I'm glad
But like there's
I
ones
chose that.
for like really as many things as possible. And like there's also some like the other things as well. Like I'm looking here, like there's ones for open source support. So like see if you like things that you can use tools like support a company. Open source maintainers like helping them.
You want, you can just copy that link into the Slack channel.
Which one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but like I see as well, like there's one for mental health, because like that's a thing that really a lot of people take back, because like in this world where everything's moving so fast, it sometimes can get overwhelming for all the things. Like being able, like having resources for like mental health is a very good. Yeah, it's like there's just lists on this. So like this is like it's a great resource to just like dive into really whatever like it's both there's a lot of technical stuff, but there's also a lot of non-technical stuff as well.
Right.
There's that. Let's see. Yeah. So does anyone have any other questions?
You were talking about Help Wanted earlier.
Yeah.
So was that for GitHub, and did you just type in Help Wanted?
Yeah, so-
You're looking for help?
So with that, like there is, so in GitHub, you can actually go up, you can search by a label across the entire site,
Right.
which would likely return you millions of issues.
Yes, there were a lot.
Well, like the nice thing is like if you go in here and like if I come here, so if you like go to like find a thing I find a random review, like for instance, I'm just going to Gatsby. You can actually go into, so this is not specific to just GitHub, but like GitLab and Backbone can have similar tools as well. That's like there's a way you can label stuff, and then you can search for like help wanted. And if you click that, it will filter down to just all the things for these help wanted tags. And then also like alongside it, I think the help wanted sometimes can be more of a like higher level topic. So if you like, it may not be always like if you're like diving into like actually like the first code contribution to something, it may not be the best. But like if there's one that has like a help wanted and good first issue, like that's kind of saying like here we're looking for new contributors that maybe never contributed to this project before. Here's one that could be open to you.
And so if you want help, you just create a help wanted repo in your project?
Yeah, well, that's another thing. So I was like saying earlier, like if you're saying like if you want to put up a like an open source product, you're saying like I'm looking for other people to like look for things. You could submit like features that you would wish would exist in this project, but maybe you don't have the time to do such.
Right.
So maybe you can push like saying help on it, and then you can maybe go into like a either local community Slack channel or maybe like on Twitter or somewhere and say, hey, I'm working on this project. I would love for other people to help out and contribute to it. And then they can come in here and see like, okay, here is all the things that like here are like things that they're wanting to be added, but like they may not have the time to do such.
And just to make it easier to find in a search, most people are just adding the words help wanted.
Yeah, I think GitHub actually by default adds those tags.
Oh,
So it adds those labels. So then if I want to say go into so I'm logged in as Joey, so I can't actually change these labels, but like since I am a collaborator of the project, I can actually come in here. I can come to issue and I see, okay, this looks like a fairly simple issue. I can actually click on this label and I can actually add them to a specific issue.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Who maintains Stack Overflow? 'Cause that's
Yeah.
invaluable most of the time.
Yeah, so I think Stack Overflow that's also like, that is another useful thing. Like, hey, like you may just have a generic question about some technology, maybe it's a tech, maybe it's some library, some piece of software. I think the company at large that maintains it.
Yeah, it's like one big company that there's
It's-
Stack Overflow for
I think
everything.
Yeah, I think it's called Stack Exchange.
Yeah. And then it's like Overflow is like coding, but there's like for every other topic you can think of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's Jeff Atwood, who, what did he also build? Because he's been like, if you see like, when you see like a lot of these big sites, like as people make a lot of various things. Like they don't make just, like some people are known for like just one thing. So like maybe Steve Jobs, he was known for Apple.
Right.
But like a lot of like nowadays, there are a lot of people that are like, I'm working for like, there are people that maybe build a startup for like 10 years and they're like, okay, now I'll build another product. They may want to go to another company and hop around in that sense. Atwood. Yeah, so he actually has, and like, see, he built Cyberpro and yet he has a blog for like just putting stuff up here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so. Oh yeah, so he also made this. Yeah, he also made this form software called Discourse. So like this is another thing that he builds. But like, and it's also like personal sites. It's cool to just like kind of dive in and see what they're writing, see what they've they worked on and just see that. He commented, I'm Jeff Weatherwood. I live in Berkeley, California with my wife, 2 cats, 1 crossed out, 3 children. It's like just interesting to see like how people, like, so it looks like, yeah, so he's been doing this since 2004. So like he's had this site up for now 15 years.
Oh.
So, yeah, so like he was commenting that he, like in 2012, like he actually left Stack Exchange, and he wanted to like spend time with his family, but also he then started up Discourse, which is now just he wanted to make an open source discussion platform. Rather than having a question and answer, it was more of he wanted to make a platform where you can have discussions of like a forum software. And he has stuff like what? That's right. But sometimes like it's just interesting just to see like going to like see if like a very like probably known person has a site, has a blog, and just see what they're up to. Because like there's sometimes like it's interesting sometimes to see how how human some of these people like all the way at the top are. Because like when you talk to them, like they are just people at the end. And then there's people like Elon. He's interesting. But yeah.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Yep. So actually, just to wrap it up. So thank you. So last thing is so you can actually find me mostly everywhere at my handle, which is Navbar. But like I think you shared the slides. So if you want to go back into here, it's on and look at stuff, you can click on these things. So I have my Twitter, I'm on Twitch, I have GitHub, and there's my site. You can just see more about me.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank
you.
that's, I owe checks to, I'm gonna be doing that outside, I'll come back to you.
Awesome. I think great. Appreciate it. Like we had,
Alright, so we'll just take a 5-minute break real quick. I just gotta get set up with everything. So if you need to grab the restroom or something, we'll do that now. I'm just gonna mute the stream. So anyone listening remotely, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
what am I trying to do? I just want to know how
unmuted. Oh, someone has their, okay. That's okay, make sure I'm not unmuted here, on my speaker. Okay, the code that we're gonna be writing over the next couple weeks for this application, you could totally just use that for your capstone if you need it, by only changing a few components out. So, or you can pick and pull pieces out of it. So that I tried to keep it as generic as I could, so that you could reuse a lot of the code for your own projects if you wanted to. But it's also, even if you use none of it, it's great practice for constructing it.
When we're done, if it gets to the point where I can use a lot of this to do what I need to, I'll buy you a steak dinner.
Oh, I'm vegan, but that's okay. I'll take a tofu dinner. Tofurkey's good. All right. So yeah, so like the basic structure of this thing. I mean, I know a lot of you're not going to be building enterprise level applications for your capstone, but this is very simplistic. But I think you can actually build upon it if you just use it as a base if you wanted to, or just use it as inspiration for when you write your own code. So I did try to keep that as relevant as I could, because I can't write an app for to demonstrate everyone's single type of capstone project, but I tried to include elements that maybe most of you are going to want to use. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the link that I don't have up right now. Where did I put that? Students, I just needed my outline.
And I was gonna say, it helps me as you're moving along, like if you can comment on some of the code that you explained.
Yep.
And then when we get to important stopping points, to maybe copy and paste those snippets into Slack.
Sure, yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
Yep. I'm gonna make sure I comment inside the React application itself.
Okay.
I'll show you how to add comments in places where you think you can't add comments. So there's ways to comment inside the code that is typically not commentable.
Because sometimes inside the practice, I've tried to do that before and I've messed up my code.
Yes, there's a special way to get around that.
Okay.
Yep.
So I have a question, maybe it's a question, I don't know. But when you're styling in React, which I know you're gonna cover, but is there a difference between styling in React or styling in a React strap with a React component?
So the styling in the React strap component is already done for you.
Okay, so you can't really change it except for like color or?
You'll have to look at their documentation on what you can change and what is just kind of inherent in there.
Okay.
So the way that I'm going to use some React strap in here just to kind of show you quickly how to use their documentation to quickly get stuff into your project without having to write up a lot of CSS boilerplate. But I also am going to show you how to include your own CSS file.
Oh, good, okay.
Right? So if you don't want to use React strap at all, but you still want to use Bootstrap, you can still include it in your project and use it, but not have to use their components.
Perfect.
The components they have are just kind of like shortcuts so you don't have to write all those class names out.
So like buttons and stuff, if you want it to look a certain, okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so what we'll do first is we'll talk about all the various components we're going to need in this application. So for Jaquay and Tim, you weren't able to see this, but this is the application that we're going to be building. And why is this? Hold on. I want the whole desktop. Okay, I hope so. As long as that green bar doesn't show around my, oh no.
Yeah.
Well, it's not hopefully it doesn't show up on the live stream.
That's the live stream. So you can see.
Oh, good. Okay, so it's just, I'll have to endure. All right, let's go back to here. So this particular application is a very simple one. It's for a fictitious company called Byte. Byte is a distributor of adventure gear. So they distribute backpacks and canteens and hiking boots. Those are their three main exports. So if you click Byte, it takes you to and I'll just put this link also. in Slack. Oh, I'm already in there. Oops. I keep doing that. All right. Byte is just a link that takes you to the landing page, which is our home page. Inventory takes you to an inventory page where you can see our current quantities. It just shows what the product is. We can click on that link. It takes us to some information about that product. If you notice, I can click the back button. So we're actually routing via the browser's history API. And if I click shipments, again, it shows a list of a bunch of shipments that we're expecting. We can see one's been received, 3 have not been received. We can see the quantity of each product coming in. So over the course of the next 2 weeks, we're going to be building this thing and show you every step of the way. All right, so what are the components that we will need? Let me open up another window. So I developed this entire application in a tool called codesandbox.io, which I've been using for the past 1.5 years or so. It's basically Visual Studio Code, but online. And you can actually develop entire applications in it. You can test them in different browsers. You can test them on your mobile device just by going to the link for that particular repository. And when you're ready to push it to GitHub, you can actually check it into GitHub through there, or you can download it as a zip file and do whatever you want locally with it as well. It's a great tool. It's free to use. You just need a GitHub account, and I know everyone here has one. If you feel really strongly about this tool, there is a way to contribute monetarily to it. I actually do that every month because I use it for work for my personal projects, and I use it at work too. So this is what this tool is, in case anyone has any questions on it.
I thought it was something you developed for your own website.
Anyone can use it. It's a great tool. I'm glad I found it because let's say you're developing something, you close your computer down, you find yourself somewhere else like, oh, I'm on another computer, but I can still get to my project and I can still do work on it. Right? So there's that versatility. Like I have the laptop that's issued to me from work. I have my personal one. So if I don't bring my personal one to work, I can still work on some projects that I've been developing, like on my lunchtime at work on this computer. That's great. All right, so this folder structure here shows us is this large enough? Can everyone see this? Okay. Yeah. How's that? We'll be doing all of our coding in Visual Studio Code, but we'll use this as reference. So under the source folder, if we look at our personal source folder, all we have is just a bare bones stuff. We don't really have much in there. It's gonna look like this afterwards. So we can see we have a styles CSS. We have an index. This index file, this is hard. It's very, very large. This index file is this index file here. All it is just the React dom.render method. I think you've been introduced to that in the first week. It's just the thing that takes your application and mounts it into a div in the DOM. So it has some place to live. So in this case, we're looking for document.getElementById root. So we're looking for a div with an ID of root, and it'll take your application and mount it to it. So when you type npm start, it finds that, puts it in there after the browser launches, and then you can see your application. There's a utils folder for some nifty sorting utilities we'll be creating. There's a store, which is our state management solution, which we'll get into, probably more of that next week. Constants, for any constants that are not changing throughout our application. All of our components that we'll need, there's not a lot. I'll just go through at a high level so we can see our app component, not very large. Our header component is probably one of the longest ones because it's a lot of Navbar stuff. This is the home page, which is literally this image with this text. That's all it is. So you don't need a lot of code to create a lot of content or visual appeal. Inventory, this is that inventory page. As you can see, there's not a lot here, but it does reference another particular component which is our table component. Actually, this is probably the largest component of them all because there's logic inside of it to handle which way the items are sorted within it. And also there's shipments and shipments list. So the list is essentially the same thing as table. They're both displaying data in a similar way. Let me go into the other one.
Do you want us to create all those folders in our own?
We're gonna do that tonight.
Oh.
Yep. And we'll do it kind of like in a specific order, so we don't
Okay.
want to overload real quick. But so inventory and shipments look very similar. They both kind of look like tables, but this is an actual table and shipments is just a list. So you can style things to look like other things. So there's multiple ways to create a component. So if you're looking at something, oh, I really want to create this table-like thing, but I don't want to use a table because maybe I don't like tables or maybe it's not right for my data. That's okay. You can generate a list and just style it that way. There's a lot of ways to do the same thing. All right. Also, just as a reminder from yesterday, if I go too fast on something, just say, hey, Joey, slow down. I know you're excited to talk about React, but I have a question.
Joey, I have a question. Did you stop the stream?
The stream? Does it not work?
No. I'm asking, can you stop the stream?
Oh. All right, so let's go into moving this around so I can actually see what's going on. All right, so we have a components folder, and then we also have something called actions. Ooh, man, this is touchy. Oh, what's going on? All right, actions are related to our state management solution. So when we want to change data in our store, we have to dispatch an action to it so that the data can be changed. And we'll get into that. But I just wanted to give a quick highlight of this. So this is the structure that we'll be building our folder and file structure. And then we can see our data up here, which we've already done, and we've got you two up to speed on that. That's going to be all of our test data. Each one of these high-level properties in this JSON object represent each of the routes we'll be grabbing our data from. And public is just our index HTML, which has our div with the ID of root. All right, so we already have the basic components there. So we'll jump back over into Visual Studio Code. We can actually close this terminal out. Don't really need that right now. Is this font too small, or is this okay? A little bigger? Okay. It gets a little tough on my little monitor here. Okay. So we already saw the types of things that we're going to need, right? We can start with some of the basic components we're going to need to set up this whole structure with. And we'll start it off with, if I can get over to my solution. We have to rearrange our source folder real quick. So inside source, can I move that? Okay. Oh, I can just minimize that, right? It's jumping everywhere. There it goes. I'm not a Zoom person.
Are you trying to get rid of that box? That green box?
Yeah.
So the last time Max had to stop it and then restart it, and it got rid of that.
Oh, the box wasn't so much the hassle, just all those windows that were popping up. All right. Let's see. Unless that's really distracting for you guys. It probably is. So I just stopped the share and restart it? Is that all he did?
I think so.
All right. We'll be right back in just a second with the visual. We'll deal. We'll figure it out. Okay. So inside source, yep. We're going to create a new folder in source. We're just going to call it components. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move app into components. because it is a component. Yep, right. So that app.js is now inside the components folder.
Oh, the app.js, not app CSS.
Correct.
Okay.
That changes something, right? Because our index.js file is expecting it to be in the same level. So if we go to index.js, we can see we're importing app from ./app. That means the same directory. Not the case anymore. So now it's actually coming from components app, and we can actually just get rid of that.
So it asked me if I want to update my imports, though.
If you wanted to, you can say yes. It's essentially going to do what I just did.
Okay.
I just wanted to explicitly show you the change rather than having it do it automatically. But Visual Studio Code is really nice like that. It says, oh, hey, I see you changed an import. Do you want me to update all your references to it? That's super helpful. Some cases it gets kind of wonky, depending on the library you're working with, but 95% of the time it works fairly well.
It's just that actually.
App.js? We don't need app.css. You don't have to delete it. We're just not going to use it. Yeah. So I cleared it out because it's distracting to me. Just keep in mind that app.css is imported in, I believe, index.js. So if you delete it, you'll have to make sure you delete the import for it. Otherwise, it'll throw an error. Okay. So inside app, let's just do this real quick. We'll start up the terminal, and I'm just going to type npm start. I just want to make sure that that change in the import actually worked. So in my case, I just have this text of hi. So when it starts this up, I should see the word hi after it loads. And I do not, so I probably typed something wrong. Oh, I just need this. There we go. So / the directory name and then /app. So there's another thing that we can do. I don't know if this was touched upon when you guys went over Node, but if you have a folder, like say components, where you have a lot of things that you're going to be importing out of it. Oh, okay. Let's say we're going to have 8 components inside this thing. Let's say we wanted to export that out of there. You can export it. You can create like a default export point inside your component folder. We don't really need it for this particular application, but I want to show it to you so you understand what it is, because you're going to see that in a lot of projects that you might contribute to, or if you go to work for someplace and they might be doing this too. So inside components, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call that index.js. And I'm going to move my, there we go. That way I'm not crossing out my lines of code here. So inside index.js, by supplying an index.js file inside a folder, because the underlying framework under this underlying platform is node-based, whenever Node sees an index.js file, it considers that to be the default point to look at for that folder. So for importing or exporting out of that folder, or I'm specifically exporting out of that folder, you can export everything out of that folder. I'll show you in just, it'll make more sense when I type it out. So what I'm going to do is inside here, I'm going to say export. And how do we have this labeled? We have this labeled as default. So default as app from app. And what this is saying I'm going to export the default export out of app, and I'm going to call it app. That may seem redundant, but there's actually a very good reason why we would need to do that. So inside app.js, we're exporting the default. The default export is this app thing, but that's not the actual name of the thing from anyone else's point of view. It's not app. It's whatever they decide to name it. So if we look over at the index.js file for the source folder, we could say we're importing app from components app, but I could easily say import my app. And that will work. The default export is just that. It's the default export. You need to supply the name for it. It's just convenient for us to say, oh, this is the export default called app. So I'm going to import app from here. That makes sense to us because we're developing it and we can see the correlation. But that's not necessarily what you have to call it. If it's the default. If we were to do something like this, where we're export the function app, I can't use my app if there's no export or no default export. I would have to do this because it's a named export. I'm explicitly exporting this thing called app. So when I import it, I have to throw it in these curly braces. It's kind of like the destructuring thing, right? So your default export is kind of, think of it as an object with these properties. One is called default, right? Yep.
Does it matter whether or not the first letter on the file names, whether or not it's capitalized?
No, but there's a convention that if you capitalize, like app.js, I know right off the top, that's a component in there. Yeah. So whether, like if, for example, if we look at here in utils, util.js, I can clearly see that's not a component. It's not capitalized. It must be some other file.
Okay, but this index.js that we're creating, that is a component or?
Oops.
Because
Oh my gosh. Hold on a second. Get out the thing here.
That's a component that's going to do the exports, correct?
This index.js, yeah, it's not a component
Oh, it's not
itself,
a component. Okay.
but it's going to do some work for us.
Okay, so I'll leave that.
Yep. Plus, lowercase index.js is what Node is looking for. All right, so.
Can you say that's like, if app is a function
Mhm.
that you need to run, then you need more braces. But if app is-
No.
Okay.
App, in this case, is a named export,
And you text.
right? Down here, this is the default export. I could put anything in here. I could say hi, and it'll export hi as the default. So if I import something from this file, it's going to throw whatever that is into the variable I create. I just wanted to introduce this concept because you will see it. We're not really going to use it a lot in here, but I just wanted to make sure that you did see that because you will see it out in the field. I'm just going to change this back to export default app. We can leave index here. That's fine. We don't really necessarily need it.
So what did you say you changed it back to my app or just regular app or?
Oh yeah, in index, I gotta put it back to app and change it back to app. I just did that for an illustration. So and we can get rid of the export there. So our default export is app. That's why we don't have curly braces around app at this point. All right. So with that out of the way, any questions on that? Did that make sense? Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to need is, well, we have this Navbar and this home page. So if we look back at the code for app, we could see the structure here of the main application. There's an overlapping or surrounding div because we need our top level element. There's a store, a router, a header, and another div. It looks like it's got a class name of photo background. That must be this thing here. So we're going to set up this structure here. We're not going to create routes just yet. We just want to get some stuff on the screen. So inside app, we're going to need a header. Right? We'll just do this. And then we also needed that div. And it looks like it had a class name of photo-bg. I think my memory is still good. Yes. So right now we should see this. And inside here, I'm just going to throw some text in here. So we have this taste adventure 1 bite at a time and inventory manager. That'll be pretty easy. That's actually going to be our home component. I'm going to save that. React Dev Server is going to throw up at me because I haven't created those yet. So that's why if you're running React Dev Server, or if you typed npm start, you're going to see some red text being thrown at you in your terminal. I'm just going to close the terminal. It doesn't need to yell at me right now. Okay. So we're going to need some components, right? So inside the components folder, we're going to create a new file. We'll start with header.js. Okay, and then we're just going to do a couple things in here. We're going to import React from React. And then we'll create a function. Type on a PC all day long, I come use this thing. Function header. We're not going to take any props. We're just going to throw a header up at the top. But normally if you needed props, you just have a props variable here in the function. So in a class, you would say this.props because they just get passed in when it's instantiated or when it gets called. In the function, we have to pass in the parameter and expect it to be there. So that's why we put props in here. But we don't actually need it for the header component because we're not expecting any props. It's just going to be a header. And then we'll return. For now, we're just going to return a div. We're just going to put the word header in it, just so that we can see something show up on the screen. And we're going to export default header.
So what's the difference between export default class and then the name of the file expand component?
Okay, so if I were to say export class, I'll call this one something different. Say my header extends react.component. So what we're doing here is we're creating a component, but it's a class-based component. Whereas here we're creating a function-based component.
So it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
This right here is essentially, it's kind of the same thing. React sees these two things as different because they're capable of different things, right? So in the past, the class components were the only ones that had access to internal state, lifecycle methods, and so forth. Functions did not have that. They were purely like presentation type components. Here's some data, throw it up on the screen. That's not the case anymore. We can use state and lifecycle type things inside of functions as well. So we don't actually have to write class components if we don't want to. You can if you're more comfortable with it. But in the future, it's pretty much all going to be functions. That was their original intent from the start. They kind of gave in and started doing classes because everyone else was. That's my impression of it. That's what I read. So now we have this function header. It's just a div with the word header in it. We're exporting it. Great. So if we go over to app.js, we can import header from header. So that should what's the word I'm looking for? It should match this here, and then that should render that okay. But it's not because we don't have home yet. We're not going to render anything until we create the home component. So just like header, we'll create a new file. home.js. We're going to import React from React function home. I know this part is a little repetitive. But that's okay, it's muscle memory at this point.
So wait, do you use render when you use functions also?
I'm sorry?
Do you use the render method? Like,
React-down.render?
wait.
Oh,
They are- Yeah.
you're saying, okay, I see what you're saying. So if I were to say class, we'll just say my home so I don't script the other thing. My home extends React.component like this, render,
Yeah,
and then return.
yeah.
There's no render method on a function, so we just return. Essentially, you don't need, the function is the render method itself. So that's one less thing we need to write. Now, before we save this file, there's a couple things that are on this div. We're going to give it a class name of home-page. And inside this div, we're going to create an H1. Give that a class name of home-title. And there's a very specific reason why, which we'll get into. And then here we can put our taste adventure 1 byte at a time. And underneath that one, I'll let you guys catch up with the typing in just a second. I'll just put this out there. Last name is home-subtitle, and that's the inventory manager. Text. All right, so everyone close? 2 seconds, okay. I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. All good? Okay. So in app, just like we're importing header, we're going to import home from home. When I save that, that should satisfy this component declaration as well. So if I head over to my browser, I see my header, taste adventure 1 byte at a time, and inventory manager. So I'm rendering everything inside my app.js file.
Let me see. Oh, yeah, I didn't save this.
Is it app.js? You go into app.js? Oh, you've only put header there. Here, I'll put my thing on the screen. Oh, it's right here on the screen. So you only have the header. That's why.
Okay.
Yep. So you'll need to
Okay.
type this out as well. Yep. Oops.
Photo.bg, was it?
Photo-bg. Yep.
Dash. And that was it. Oh, no, there, okay.
Okay. So this is looking beautiful. Not really. Be nice if we could actually start seeing some better fonts and some stuff on the screen. So we're going to implement some styles. And we're gonna start with Bootstrap. So there's several ways. Yep,
Wait a minute, what is in the header folder? Say header.
the header.js file.
Yes.
All right now it's just this.
It does say. Okay, so I don't have the 1 byte at a time.
Oh, that's in your home.js file? It's my home right there. Okay, so go to app.js. You've imported home, you've got home there. Oh, there's an error here.
Oh, that was when I was trying to start up the backend.
Oh, it's not started. So if you go to npm start. They doesn't like something.
Missing script start.
Oh, you probably have the
This
right
is the
directory.
backend. This is the front end.
Okay, so, oh, yeah, 'cause it needs to be, oh, it's
Yeah.
there.
That was it.
So,
Let's put that,
so
figure
you
it out.
create your function.
You've got
export some
header div home.
So if you look at the last line, it's an export default header. And that's how you allow.
Yeah, header just says header.
Right, and then home. Export default. It's okay. This all, this looks good, okay. Let's start this and rerun it. So control C. Run it. And then head back over.
So you do actually.
Header. Interesting. There should be something wrong with
Yep, and
Closing? No, it doesn't.
No, it has it. Oh,
it's the same directories.
this closing tag for header,
Yeah.
it's a self-closing tag, just like home
So I
is.
don't need that.
You don't need it. I just need to put the slash at the end of header,
Yep. All
Tag.
that same syntax.
Here?
just because it's a self-closing one. There, now save that, you should be able to see it.
Reference in the same directory, and there's-
There we go.
There we go.
Right.
Thank you.
I was wondering why it wasn't clicking for me there. All right.
Now you have one more.
Okay. So styling, again, lots of ways to do styles. We're gonna grab, first of all, we'll grab Bootstrap. There's many ways to implement Bootstrap. Several, not many, but one is we could import it, and another one we can go out and we can grab a reference to it on the CDN. So I think Max in his demonstration imported it, but I'll show you the other way just so you can see it. So if we head over, oh, I gotta move this. This thing's gonna be in the way.
Is that say that home does not have default export. So same thing with it.
Get this out of the way. There we go. Let's see.
So if we go to header. or else-
Yeah. Oh, good. There it goes. All right.
Yeah.
So if we go to getbootstrap.com, and click Get Started. We can literally copy and paste the link to the style sheet if we want to. Now keep in mind that in order to see these styles, you will have to be connected to the internet. Right? If you want to work on this project offline, you'll need to import npm install Bootstrap.
Okay.
All right, so I'll show you this way first. So all we have to do is grab this whole link here. Or they have a convenient copy button. We'll head over to our project. And inside the public folder, there's an index.html. Somewhere inside the head tag, we'll paste that link and save it. So now when I go to my app, we could see that the text has changed. We're actually using Bootstrap for styling. So that's one way to do it. I'm going to comment this out. Save that. It should re-render with my old font. And the other way that was shown as well, npm install -- save Bootstrap. So these are two convenient ways to get Bootstrap into your project. Like I was saying before, in order to see the other way with the style sheet link, you'll have to be connected to the internet to see it. Now, when you deploy your application and it's online, unless Bootstrap CDN server or the CDN server that's hosting that is down, it should work fine. This is going to take a little bit. But if you don't want to rely on that CDN, there's two other things you can do. One, you could npm install it like this, which is essentially taking all the CSS and putting it locally into your node modules folder. Or you could download Bootstrap and take that file and kind of have it locally yourself. So there's a multitude of ways to get CSS into your project. If you just want to do something quick, the CDN link is a quick way to get it in there just to test things out, see if you like it. Maybe you don't want to npm install it yet. Maybe you're not sure. You can always just take the link tag out and it's gone, right? That's also one less thing that you have to host personally, but it's at a cost, right? So if their server goes down, no one sees your styles, or at least not the Bootstrap versions of the styles.
Does that happen often?
No, not that I've noticed.
So there's really.
There's a lot
just
of,
miss a file.
yeah, there's a lot of libraries that are hosted on CDNs. They're kind of like a backbone to a lot of different things. So there's extra care put into making sure that those are live all the time. All right. So now that I've npm installed it, how do I get it in there? Well, if we look at package.json, let's just make sure it's there. We can see Bootstrap 431. It's the same one as the one I linked to. Let's go over to Bootstrap and see what they say. I don't know if they have a React one. There's a quick way to get to that. So what I'll need is, so there's style sheet. This is, oh, this is React Bootstrap. That's not what I wanted. Adding Bootstrap, create React app. That's what we want. So we could see this is what we need to import right here. We import the CSS file that we just npm installed to our node modules folder. This just happens to be where it is. And I just did that by Googling npm install Bootstrap React, and we could see it was the second link there. Another way to figure that out is to go into your node modules folder, go to the Bootstrap install distribution. You can see there's a CSS file, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. But we probably want the bootstrap.min.css. That's the minified version. So it's the one that's the least amount of kilobytes. So we probably want to import that one. And where we import it would be in, let me close all these windows down. There's too many open. It's confusing. Our top level index.js file in the source directory. Import it right there. And I want the minified one.
You said NPM install Bootstrap.
npm install -- save Bootstrap. If it's taking, yeah, if it's taking a lot of time, you could just use the CDN link
Yeah.
to kind of move it along. I'm just good. Down here, make sure I'm in still in client. I'm going to npm start, and we're going to see what it looks like. It's loading back up. And we can see our styles are back to the bootstrappy font.
Just use the.
Oh, yours should. So just-
Yeah. Before that.
Hey, that's.
Yep, you got it. Yep, there's something at the top there.
So if you want to see where-
That is, oh, can you go back to your screen? Oh, yeah, go back to your index, JS, or index HTML files. You didn't comment the full line out. That's all.
I can take it out there, right?
Yeah, if you're not gonna use that, you can just delete it. All right, so those are 3 different ways to get Bootstrap in your project. Link it, download it, or npm install it.
Bootstrap.css. No, the CSS.
You can use, there's different reasons, but the minified ones. If you want to.
Probably want the minified one because we're not going to be going into the CSS file to change it. So just keep it, the minified one's as small as you want it to be. That's the one you'd want to deploy anyways. You don't want to force your users to download the non-minified version, right? Because that's bandwidth that's being taken up. Okay, so I'm going to close this tab out. We have our app that looks bootstrappy. And next, we're going to use our own custom styles, which I've conveniently typed out for you just for this app. And I'll show you how to import custom styles into your application. So if we go to, excuse me, where is it? I'm going to repost this link at the bottom of the chat so it's easy to find. Nope, not wrong direction. Okay, so if we go to the link that I just posted in Slack, that brings us back to the Careers and Code sandbox under my folder. And if we go into byte-styles.css, we're going to do the same thing that we did with bytedata.json. So we're going to take and copy all of this. Let me collapse all these folders. This is really difficult to look at. Okay. Inside our client source folder, at the same level of index.js, we want to create a new file in the source folder. Oops. We'll call it byte-styles.css. And we're going to paste it in and save that. Byte-styles. All right, and then in our index.js file, right underneath our Bootstrap, we're going to import as a string /byte-styles.css. So all we have is just a CSS file at our source folder. You can literally just import it, and it's going to apply those styles to your application. Or if you want to apply specific styles at a component level, you'd import it in the component file, and it'll apply it towards that component. Now, if we go back over to our rendered app, that photo-bg class that we gave now renders that pretty little graphic for our homepage.
That picture's in there.
Let's see what you got going on.
Put that there.
Okay, bite dash styles. Your bite dash style CSS. Got that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
It's in your email.
oh, we need to save the file. That's it.
I do.
So failed to compile, so something is not go back. Sorry. Let's see where you actually put it. So go back. Oh, it's inside components. You want to move that up to source. Just drag it to source. Compiling, compiled successfully. Now hopefully you'll see a nice. Yep. So right here. Next.
Yeah.
This right here. Home is not defined. Oh, we didn't import it. You created it, right? Okay, so all we have to do is import home from that section. We can, yeah, we'll tackle it one error at a time.
I think I did see that last time.
Yeah, you want to make sure when you're assigning props to components, the name equals, value. Make sure there's no spaces between that, because it doesn't know what to do with it. Watch your quotes. Okay, just save that and see what else it says. Successfully. And then go back to, it was probably related to the legal thing. Okay.
Yay.
So we have that. And then you just need to get caught up with the provide CSS. So we have that, okay. So we need to import byte-style CSS into the index.js file at the source folder. Not the one in components. This one right here.
Actually, it'll be fine to just pull it down.
As long as it's at the top.
Oh, yeah.
So line 5 is fine. Yeah, I mean the top of the file, not necessarily the first line. Import space, so in quotes, you're gonna give it the path, which will be /byte-style.css.
I don't remember what the
File-style.
Yeah. Well, what it's important. They can put-
That's it. You're just gonna import that file. It'll know what to do with it.
Okay, so when we use, what's the difference between?
This is a module that's exporting things.
Okay.
This is just a file, we're gonna import it and use it, the entirety of the file.
All right.
So you can save that, make sure you save this one.
Doesn't matter if it's.
And let's go take a look at the app. Okay, everyone on the same page right now? Pun intended? The home page, okay. Excuse me. All right, so everyone has their Bootstrap and their aerial graphic. All right, so now this isn't really, it's getting close, like we've got a home view, but we don't really have our header yet, so we'll tackle our header as well. Or if we want to take like a 5-minute break, if anyone needs it.
That sounds good.
So we'll limit it to 5 minutes, really quick, because we only have 40 minutes left. Let's minimize that. Yeah, so we'll be back at 7:55 on the dot. Make sure everyone's caught up. All right, everyone, so we're gonna get started again. And we're going to, there was a question regarding React Strap versus Bootstrap. And what it would look like to have a React Strap component next to just a Bootstrap styled component. And what we'll have to do first is I'm gonna have to Control-C on my server and make sure I'm at the right level. I am. I'm going to sorry, npm install -- save React Strap. And so we're going to be using this anyway for the header. So this is actually a great segue into it. And I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to get a bunch of code into your project with the least amount of effort as possible for a great starting point. This is how I used to do it, and I still do it today when I need to. I don't write everything from scratch. All right.
It was npm install -- save
React Strap.
Yeah,
Yep.
all one word, right?
Gesundheit. All right, so we're going to close out byte-styles.css. We're going to close out the index. So we don't have anything running. I am going to run my npm start just so that the solution's running in the background. Great. Oh, well, almost there, but that's okay. Okay, so inside components header, we want to have like a navbar thing.
Okay.
Right? We're going to import some stuff from React Strap to do it. But in order to know what to import, we're going to borrow some code from React Strap. So if we go over to their site, I have 2 of these running. Let's see if we can close that one. I'm going to go to, we're just going to type in React Strap. Oops. Still knows what I'm trying to say. reactstrap.github.io. We should see this. If we go to components, we scroll down, we can see that they have a navbar. Let's check it out. So here's the basic navbar right here. Looks pretty cool. Maybe we want to use that. So what I can do is I can just come down here, grab this entire thing. Since it is React code, in my header, instead of returning just a div, well, I still want the div. Inside this div, I'm just going to paste that code. Now, this isn't going to work yet because I haven't really imported any of these components, but I know which ones I need to import now just by looking at what I pasted in. So I'm going to need a navbar. So what we're going to do is we're going to import navbar from React Strap. I know I need that. What else do I need? I need nav item, nav link, navbar, navbar brand, navbar toggle, toggler, sorry, and collapse.
Joey, I have a question.
Yep.
It was some of the text after 7. Did you, I was waiting
Oh,
to
yep.
see it on your screen, I think.
Yes.
So
Yes, there are.
We haven't typed that yet, right? Ours is like pretty blank as far as.
Yeah, so you should be seeing these red arrows being thrown at you at this point. So we're not going to use everything in this nav bar. So if we take a look at it, we can see that there's a drop-down menu over here with some extra options. We don't really need that for our application, so it's safe to eliminate that from our code. So if I go down here do this uncontrolled drop down. I don't necessarily want that.
Okay.
So I can just get rid of that entire component. And then we notice here that it compiles successfully.
Did you take the div out?
What do we have here? Oh, your import statement needs to be at the top of your file.
I put it, I typed it. So what did you say we don't need?
Oh, you have it right here.
Yeah, I
already.
typed it.
Oh, yes, you can just get rid of that. Oh, I see what happened. You copied their entire code.
Okay.
That's what happened.
So just take all this out,
Yeah, just
start over, it's like a Navbar.
start over.
Okay.
So go.
Um,
So we only need from the div up to the other div.
Okay.
Just that part. Back up. We need to type some other things in.
Oh, I'm looking at it.
I can clean it up a little bit. Just hit Command Z real quick. And then close, get rid of this. Close your div tag. And then you're gonna do end parentheses, close the parentheses now. And then end the curly brace. So that closes your function, and then inside between that div, now paste. Now paste. And then, so we can save that. Okay. Oh, so we're not going to be using these. So we'll go back to here, and this, nope, down here, uncontrolled drop down, that entire thing, down to the next uncontrolled drop down. Delete that, save it. Compile it successfully. Except there's other stuff. Oh, yes, we'll need to do that too. So this is where state's going to start to come into play. So everyone should probably be seeing something like this. Cannot read property toggle of undefined. So on their particular example, the way that they're toggling that little hamburger menu up and down is by using state within that component that they've shown you, right? So we'll need to implement that in order to make it happen. Before we do, we're just going to say is open is equal to false. And on click is just going to be an empty function right now. At this point, all we want to do is get something rendered on the screen, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start implementing other things.
Where was that?
So
Like I just found it. So what was the, just leave it empty, an empty string? Oh, empty.
you can also put null for now if you want, just the word null. And then is open equals false in curlies. Okay. So now if we go over back to our application, it's rendering, and we can actually see a navbar at the top.
Yes, we can.
But it's not quite what we need yet. We still need to implement some stuff here. So in order to make it look like the application, on the navbar component, color is going to be equal to dark instead of light. And instead of light, we're going to change that prop to dark. And expand is going to be SM for small. So it's only going to show that little hamburger menu on like mobile phones and stuff like that. Really small viewports. So this is what our navbar, initial navbar tag should look like.
So that expand is for mobile?
Yeah, so that tells it when the screen size is considered small, show the hamburger menu. So if you look here, now it's starting to look. Oops, that's not the other one. Let me go back and go to here. So we have this, and we have this. Starting to look pretty close. So let's take it a couple steps further. And well, our application is not called React Strap, so we need to change that to Byte. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap that. Actually, we'll just take that out for a second. We'll put in a span, put Byte in the span, and we'll give that span a class name of text-warning, which is like an orangey yellowish color. And now we have our Byte in yellow, orange, pumpkin color. It's like a pumpkin, I guess.
The span's still closing too.
Span needs a closing tag. Yep. So you should have this on your screen. Also, these nav items are not really where they're supposed to take us. We don't have components, right? We have inventory and we have shipments. So we'll have to change that as well. So for right now, we are going to, we're just going to change this for now. We're just going to change components to inventory because this is going to come up in when we do routing. We'll change that. Get into routing probably first thing tomorrow. Right now, we just want to make sure our header is going to show up at the top of the screen. We can see some styles coming in. This is going to be the base of our application. Everything else is going to live inside of a route after we implement the router tomorrow. All right, so we should see something like this, inventory and shipments. We'll probably want to move that over. Oh, you want me to keep that up?
Can you go back to the spans and go on there?
Right here?
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, the other thing we want on Navbar, fixed equals top. That way, when we scroll down, did I put that right? Fixed equals top. Yep. You want to put it here. Oops. Fixed equals top. Dark. Didn't like something. Oh, that's what didn't like. There we go. It's kind of hard to tell on this, but I'm already like full screen. But if I were to scroll down in here, the header will remain at the top.
Oh.
So no matter how far down you scroll, you're always going to see the header. That's what fixed equals top means. It's just a Bootstrap class that gets appended to that navbar element. If you were to look at the implementation under the, not React Strap, but under the Bootstrap site, you'll see a whole bunch of class names appended to this thing. And there's like probably 7 or 8 of these things just to make it do what it does. And then all the elements below have a poop load of them, right? There's a ton of classes that Bootstrap wants you to implement. The nice thing about React Strap is it does all that for you. So you don't have to type out all those classes, but you could. So to your point, if you wanted to create, let's say, a button, just as an illustration, we'll import button from React Strap. And we'll just do this right here. Why not? We'll have a button, oops, capital button. We'll just say React Strap. So we know that it's a React Strap button. You can see the button here. If I wanted to do the same thing with just Bootstrap, I'd say button. We'll just say Bootstrap. If I were just to do this, here's a basic button. It's not styled at all. I'd say class name equals, and then Bootstrap wants you to do btn, btn-sm if it's a small button, and btn primary if it's a primary colored button. And it's styled using Bootstrap styles, but you're giving them all the class names that you want applied. React just does it for you. It's like a time saver, really. But if you wanted to change it just a little bit and still use Bootstrap, you can do that. So that's the difference. Did that make sense? Okay. All right. So now we have a header here. Let's get some state in here because we want to be able to.
How did you get inventory and shipments to be white?
By the color is dark, and it's instead of the light prop, it's just the dark prop.
Oh, I still.
Yep. Otherwise, it'll put dark text on dark background because color equals dark means, oh, this is a dark background. I should use all the things that make it pop against dark backgrounds.
Oh, okay.
It's just getting used to their class names. Okay, so what else? Oh yeah, so just to demonstrate what that expand does, see this little hamburger menu? This is what happens when you get to a small screen. So expand tells it when it's going to do that, but it doesn't do anything yet, right? So we have to implement some state. So instead of using class components, we're going to do it with the function components. And we're going to import something, my cursor gets there, from the React library called useState. And useState is called a hook. So React has this concept of hooks where you kind of like hook into the internal workings of a function or of a component in React. So useState is pretty explanatory, right? You're going to use a piece of state somewhere. There's one called useEffect. useEffect can do the same things as like component did mount, component did update, things like that. Right? So whenever the component does something, there's a life cycle happening. There's a moment in time where you have access to these functions where they're going to be fired. useEffect, in effect, does the same thing, except there's a little bit different syntax. But you have access to all the same stuff. So we're going to use useState. We did briefly show it before on yesterday, but if we go inside our function, before our return statement, where this is just literally a function body, right? We haven't returned anything yet, so we have access to whatever we need to. So we're going to say const, and then square brackets, because useState gives us back an array of stuff. Two things to be exact. And we're going to call the first one open, and the next one set open equals useState, and we'll give a default value of false. So open is going to contain the value of false. Set open is going to set that value to whatever we decide, whenever we decide it. That's just a function that's going to update that piece of state that's held inside the variable called open. So you can probably imagine what we're going to be using this for, right? So if we go down to collapse is open equals, and then our open variable. Now that doesn't do a lot because it's already closed. So it's not expanded, but if I change that to a default value of true, when my app renders, you can see it's expanded because is open equals true. Now we just have to be able to change that value, like whenever we click on this thing. So I'm going to set that back to false. And our on click, whenever this toggler gets clicked, we want to call set open. We would just want to be the opposite of open, so not open or bang open. If you ever hear the term bang in programming, they're referring to the exclamation point. So now, whenever I click this toggler, it's going to call this function, which goes to set open, and it just changes it to the opposite of whatever open was before. So if I click this, I can see my functionality. Now, if I were to write this as a class component, I would have to put in a constructor and say this dot state and have a property open and then call this dot toggle open and then bind that to the component and a whole bunch of stuff, right? So this, all I did was I imported one function, I called it, and I just used the stuff, right? This is a really, really quick way to work with state in any function that turns into a component. Now, there's some caveats to hooks, and we'll go over that more tomorrow. Or we can go over that today. We just have 15 minutes. I'm trying to think what we can get done in there. We'll just talk a little bit about hooks then. Because we're on the topic, we might as well do it. That way you have, I'm actually gonna have a little bit of homework for you tonight, now that I think about it, because we're at a good point for this. It's just reading, so you don't have to worry about like crafting anything up unless you want to. So for hooks, there's a set of rules that you have to follow in order for it to work properly. The first one is, well, you need access to a hook. You have to import it. All hooks have the keyword use in front of the name. Use state, use effect. There's one called use reducer. There's a whole bunch of them. You can even create your own custom hooks. But the key here is that you want to use the word use. There's a lot of words that are the same. It's just hard to say them. Use the word use in front of it so that you know that it's a hook, right? Now React is expecting this because, quite frankly, that's what they named it, and that's why you're importing, right? It has to go with it. It cannot be used in a class component. It simply won't work because there's no way to actually call it inside the body of the class. Inside the function, it must be inside the function body before you return your elements. And if you can use multiple of these hooks. So I can have const, say theme, set theme equals use state, and we'll say dark. And I could have something in the body of the component say, hey, set theme to light if it's dark, or set it to dark if it's light. But these are two pieces of state that are controlled separately, explicitly, right? So you can have as many of these in here as you want. Now, at some point, if you have like 20 of these things, it's time to refactor a little bit and think about how you want to handle this thing. But there's nothing stopping you from doing it. The key, though, is that they have to always be in the same order all the time. And you may think, well, I've already written them in that order. Why would they ever change? Right? It cares because it doesn't know the previous piece of state if it doesn't show up in the same order every single time. And you may be thinking, well, I've already written it out. How would it change order? Oops. Was not fast. Or I could say this. If open is true, do this. If open is not true, don't do that. Well, we can't do that. By conditionally doing this, under the hood, we're changing the order of how things happen inside of the function, right? This doesn't happen if this is false, but it does if it's true, which changes the order of everything that happens here. So a hook cannot be inside a conditional statement. It has to always be by itself.
Can you just go back and just show us what the hook does? Is that like where the inventory changes?
So the hook in this case for like set open and set open,
Yeah.
that's opening and closing the state of our header menu. Now it won't matter if it's not at a small window because it doesn't have the expand. But once you're in that state, you're controlling that state. Again, words that are the same across everything. Words are hard. Struggle with words.
Oh, that's so cool.
But we can use multiple themes here. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say color equals theme just to illustrate it. And every time we click, we're going to change the theme. This is just going to be for illustration. You don't have to do this. We'll say set theme, and theme equals dark. We're going to set it to light. Otherwise, set it to dark. Every time we click, which we're not really going to be able to tell. Oh, yes, we can. Right? Every time I click, it's changing that thing. That's how I'm managing state in this component. Pretty simple. Just one function and one variable to control whatever piece of state I want to control.
So
We're going to see more of this. Yep, go ahead.
Now, I was thinking of having, there's like all these pictures online of like a dirty house and a clean house, like a cleaning service. So I could have the dirty house first, and when they hit the button to get the service, then that picture could turn to the clean, and it wouldn't be that difficult to do.
It would be really easy. You literally would do just this, but instead of changing a theme on a header, you'll change what image is being supplied to your element.
So like where you have photo.bg, I would do, you have that in what home?
Sorry, just show me.
So where did you put the photo?
Oh, photo BG is in app.js. Yep. So you could control the state of that.
Okay.
Based on whatever criteria you want. Yep, so someone could click an element inside that component and it could change the value of that. So it could be the class name PhotoBG, or it could be the class name CleanHouseBG, right? And then you would just have all that stuff ready in your CSS.
There's also like podcasts, and they just like
Yes.
keep talking about them, and I was like,
Yeah, at first everyone was like, what is this? Right? Oh my gosh, what are they doing now? But and that was my first reaction, like, oh God, now I need to learn something new. But once I started using it, I don't want to use a class component ever again. One, because functions are computationally, they're less expensive, not by much, but they are. But classes get really cumbersome to type out. You have to think about everything that could happen. And then you're thinking in JavaScript, but you're thinking about it in a different way, like in a inheritance type of situation, right? Like a compiled language. Well, it is compiled technically, but like C#, right? C# is compiled beforehand. It's a class-based language. Everything inherits from something. JavaScript is not that way, but when you're writing it out in JavaScript, it gets confusing. Like, what do I do here? Why can't I call this here? You got to think about things a lot differently. So this keeps everything just straight up JavaScript, right? A function is a function is a function. I can call it the same way. I know where I have access to variables in my function. At the end, I return something. I don't have to have a special render method, right? So when you look at everything as just a function, you get really used to functions, and you just realize that everything in React really is just a function. And that kind of opens up a lot of new ideas and pathways to create different things. Because at the end of the day, that's all you're really writing are just functions. Even this JSX, it looks like HTML, but it's just like a syntactic sugar around function calls. Remember TinyFEF? We called create element, and we gave it the type of element, some props, and then some children. That is exactly what JSX is doing. It's calling react.createElement, the exact same way that we actually coded it out in the TinyFEF. That's kind of why the reason I chose that, to kind of just merge it into the React sort of thing, so it's familiar, right? And that's all JSX is doing. That's it. It's just, it looks nicer, it looks like HTML. I can clearly see in this function what is logic and what is supposed to be rendered to the view, right? So cognitively, it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot easier to quote unquote reason about. Not a big fan of that term. It just sounds too fluffy. Yeah, whenever things are too like esoteric, I call it fluffy. But yeah, so when I'm looking at this function, I know exactly what's going to end up on the screen and what's the logic behind it. And everything's contained right here nice and neat. Any questions so far on anything that we've covered today? It wasn't a whole lot, but it was quite a bit, right? There's a lot of concepts that we're introducing here. So I'll leave it up for the next couple minutes for questions.
So back to my picture thing, so it would be const open set open.
Let's actually do something similar, right? So we'll say in our app.js, right? Because here it is. We're going to import use state, and we'll say const. We'll say bg class name. And we'll say set. Well, that's a long name. We'll just say bg, and then we'll say set bg equals use state, and right off the bat, it's going to be photo dash bg, right? And then right here, I'm going to say bg. So my app should render the same, and it does, right? Because the default value is that string, right?
Right.
But what if I had a different photo?
Right.
So for example, let's say, let me put a button in here so we can clearly see it. We'll say set BG. And when we click it, we're going to set BG. And we're just going to set it to just photo dash, right? We'll pretend it's some other photo. So now, let's see, where's my button? It's probably way down at the bottom. Hold on a second. Let me put it on top. So you can clearly see it. Oops. Oh, why is that doing that? Button, here we go. Oh, it's because it's hidden underneath the header. Sorry. Let me take the header out for a second. No, there's my button. Put it in here. So, go to home. There we go. Set PG. So when I click this, it set it to something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great.
So hopefully that illustrates the
Yeah.
point.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joey.
Absolutely. Also, everyone kind of left, but I'll post the homework for tonight, and really it's just to read about hooks. So I'll give you a link to the documentation for it. You just read through it. Don't worry about trying to grasp everything. Just kind of read through it and just get it in your mind, and then as we start talking about things will start hopefully sparking.
Have a great night.
Yep, have a great night.
Opening up the header.
Yes. Let me just stop the share here.